Hello everyone, welcome to Eternal Brews. My name is Pojo, and we're doing something a little different today. I'm actually going to be showing off 3 different decks, all based around bears, because silly bear jokes is basically about half of the reason to play Kosul Brigade, and we want to talk about Kosul Brigade a lot. I didn't actually do a preview of this one. I didn't really like the one that I recorded, so let's talk about it a little bit. This is a promo card that released a couple of weeks ago. We've been fiddling with a lot of different decks for it. I think it's a cool little like meta shakeup card, and as you know, like Eternal's been doing a pretty good job of this. They basically keep releasing cards in the middle of sets where if you get a chance to play them, and as you win games, you get extra copies of them for free, and you can later craft them if you need to. But they basically just introduce something new to the meta and fun and interesting. And in this case, the thing that they introduced to the meta was the concept of a Hooru mid-range deck. So we're going to talk about a couple of interesting things that we can do with Kosul Brigade. So Kosul Brigade is a 5/4 endurance, and it has the ability Summon. You may discard 2 cards to play an 8/8 Urska the Bear with Reckless. And the many bear puns is just a huge side effect and fun benefit of this particular card. So yeah, this is a pretty sweet card for a lot of different reasons. It doesn't seem... It's very deceptively strong. I think it is actually like a really good card in general. But yeah, playing a 5/4 for 6 along with an 8/8, even if it costs you 3 cards to do so, gives you such an exceptional swing and tempo on board that you can often just completely overwhelm your opponent with it. So if you can set up a good way to get decent card advantage going, you can spend that card advantage to make Kosul Brigade into like a really good way to turn around a game when you would not otherwise be able to do so. And in all of the decks that we're going to play, you'll see that sort of benefit if you play these types of decks. Basically, if you're in a situation that seems kind of bad, Kosul Brigade will save you. If you're in a situation that's kind of good, Kosul Brigade will completely overwhelm your opponent. They will not be able to deal with it with single target removal. The card generates just a very big unit, which is pretty hard to kill for a lot of different reasons. It also generates a fairly evasive unit. An endurance card with 5/4 stats and a hybrid color means that it's immune to a lot of the necessary removal that can normally get rid of a good card. Also gives you a blocker, which is nice. It gives you 2 blockers on the first turn, which is also nice. Like basically everything that it does really impacts the board in a meaningful fashion that makes it completely worth the summon effect. And if you end up playing Kosul without the summon effect, you get an okay unit with endurance. Nothing too special, but certainly something that you can play out and get some advantage out of. So Kosul Brigade's never too bad a deal. It's certainly not a card you want to play without its summon effect most of the time, but it tends to be pretty decent in a lot of different ways. Now, the thing that makes Kosul Brigade interesting, though, is when you play it with cards that really capitalize on card advantage out of discarding, which is something that green actually has access to, but hasn't really had a lot of ways to exploit since Kosul Brigade launched. So that brings us to our first deck, Right Bear Arm, which is probably the most tuned of the 3, and the other 2 are going to be a little bit rougher, but this one I've had a lot of fun like playing around with, and I think we're getting into a spot where it's actually pretty good. Actually, I'm going to cut this Champion of Order and switch in a Crystallize, because I think that Crystallize is a pretty solid card here, and yeah, just mild change to make there. Let me go ahead and just do that before we do it. But that was the last change that I was planning on making before we actually previewed the deck. Okay, so here's the basic idea behind the Right Bear Arm deck. What we are doing is we are capitalizing on the ability to discard Privilege of Rank to cards like Whispering Wind, as well as echo cards like Unstable Form, in order to just generate card advantage in a way that's actually really effective. Beyond that, the deck is a simple sort of mid-range aggro deck. It tends to be very fast. Well, not fast, but it tends to pressure the board with 3 to 6 drops in a way that is very beneficial to your overall game plan. So we have our standard removal, Vanquish and Permafrost. We use Vanquish instead of Island's Choice here because Vanquish is more offensive, and we'll often find ourselves in situations where we want to attack into a bunch of larger units. So Vanquish tends to fill that bill a little bit better. Island's Choice is better if you're playing a more defensive board, so we might see some of that later on. So Whispering Wind here is kind of one of the key cards. It is a 2-cost card that whenever it attacks, you discard a card to draw a higher cost card from your deck. Now this tends to build into a lot of really interesting decks, but of course the really fun one is Privilege of Rank, which when you discard, you play. So you discard Privilege of Rank to Whispering Wind, you draw a 4 to 6 drop, and then you play the Privilege of Rank and get 2 Justice Sigils, which means that you essentially get a 3 for 0 out of your 1 card. It's pretty good. It's a 3 for 1 actually, but nonetheless, you get a playable card and the power to cast it, which means that your curve is very, very reliable in a way that is very, very useful to you. Okay, beyond that, we have some other card advantage cards, specifically Spire Chaplain, which is a 3/3 for 3. Very reasonable stat line, but also happens to be a card that really, really likes to draw you extra cards. It draws Justice Sigils in particular, but we don't care what cards it is we're drawing, because we're primarily trying to discard them to Kosul Brigade. And most of the time, Justice Sigils are a card that we need. So every time that we get a Justice Sigil off of Spire Chaplain, that really adds to the power of our deck in a way that's very, very meaningful. So Spire Chaplain is, I think, one of the most necessary cards to play with Kosul Brigade, and really does very well with that card. We also run Spirit Guide. This card is mostly here to make sure that aggro decks don't completely destroy us. Every once in a while there are going to be a lot of decent aggressive decks, so we want to have some lower cost drops that can do the same kind of good trading. We can also use this to buff some of our other creatures later on and give them lifesteal, which can be very beneficial depending on what the buffed unit is. If it is an 8/8 bear, it's pretty disgusting. We can also use it as a mentor effect to hold back reckless units. The interaction between Mentor and Reckless can be very beneficial if you're looking for like an extra turn to draw some sort of removal. It's kind of a minimal thing, but it's a good interaction to have, and it's some amount of synergy that you want to pay attention to. So something to keep in mind when you're playing with Spirit Guide. We're running 4 of them at the moment. It doesn't always have to be 4, but if the meta has a lot of fast cards in it, Spirit Guide is definitely going to help you out in that situation. All right. Peacekeeper's Prod is a weapon that I'm actually very, very happy to have in this deck. We're very capable of generating the influence for it because we tend to run Privilege of Rank and Spire Chaplain out, and that means lots and lots of Justice Sigils. This deck can run Elias, it can run basically anything with deep green influence without any major problems. Peacekeeper's Prod allows us to get through with our Spirit Guides, our Whispering Winds, and our Torgov Icecap traders very, very frequently, as well as buff those units up to the point where they deal pretty well with other units. So this is a good way to actually push a bunch of aggression while also making a tougher unit out of some of our mid-rangey stuff that really wants to be in this more like 6/6 range. So I really like Peacekeeper's Prod here. This is one of the better decks that it's for, and Peacekeeper's Prod is a pretty good card. I recommend playing with it and fiddling with it and figuring it out. It is a really interesting sort of mid-range tempo card that actually has some interesting applications, and I'm glad to have a home for it here. So Shelterwing Rider, the 0/4 that is a +5 when she has an Aegis, is pretty sweet. This card is very, very well statted for its overall setup, and then typically when your opponent kills it, what they leave you with is a 0/4 Aegis, or a 0/4 that has the ability to block like some of the more like offensive units that your opponent might play. So this is a good early drop that actually gives you a lot of benefit, and we really, really like this card for that reason. In addition, you can unstable form this card if the Aegis gets popped on it, or you can protect it to give it the Aegis back and thus give it the damage that it needs. Torgov Icecap Trader is a key card in almost every Urska deck. This card gives you a really good mid-range defender that also happens to be very good at attacking and also happens to have a really good late-game ability. The discard effect is very important for Privilege of Rank and for your Echo cards. So there's a lot of things that Torgov can do that are really, really beneficial to you in the long run, and it really just ties the whole mid-range deck together. I think this card's pretty necessary as a 4 of. Champion of Order is sort of a silly one of. We used Pearlescent Drake here as well. That worked pretty well. I like Order here just because it's something to draw to that kind of ends the game in a way that is a little bit different from your other options, but it's not strictly necessary. You can use anything you want in this slot. Crystallize is the other option. We like this one quite a bit. And finally, we have Kosul Brigade, of course, discarding Privilege of Rank, discarding the power gotten from Privilege of Rank, discarding unstable forms, discarding basically anything that you draw, the Spire Chaplain Justice Sigils that you're picking up. There's a lot of extra advantage to be brought from Kosul Brigade, and we definitely really like that. Finally, the right bear arm itself, Rolant's Fist. I like having a one of this card in here. If you don't have this, use Augmented Form or use more weapons like Peacekeeper's Prod or Hammer of Might. I like this one because it is just a huge pile of stats at a reasonable time, and basically you just need some sort of one-cost finisher to just jam onto your flyer and get a little bit of extra damage across. This card fills a decent slot, and it's a decent use for a legendary that you're not going to have much use for otherwise, so just something to consider if you want to play it, but again, this is a card that you can swap out as you like. I just like having it in here because, well, it is the right bare arm, so you need the fist. Although people have pointed out that it is a left-handed fist. The whole thing's ruined now. Anyways, let's get into a game with this card, and we will just go ahead, game with this deck, and we'll go ahead and show you how it plays. It's a lot of fun. All right, we are opening up against Ace Baggins in Gold 2, looks like. Well, okay. We made it up to Diamond 2 with this deck, so we upped a division with it before we tried it out. Yeah, as far as hands are going, we typically look for Whispering Wind. If we can find Whispering Wind, that makes the deck a lot better. This hand is pretty reasonable. It isn't going to be able to play anything in the hand for 2 or 3 turns, so I'm not super fond of it. I'd rather find Whispering Wind or Spire Chaplain or some of our early drops to sort of tie the deck together. So we're going to redraw here, especially since we are first, and we do not get an extra draw in that scenario. Alright, this is much better. I get to Hooru Banner, and then next turn I get to Seek Power for a green and play Seat of Order. Then I can follow that up with the Spire Chaplains, and the Spire Chaplains can transition into Torgov Icecap Trader, which is all good stuff. We'll play the Seat of Order here, and play the Justice Sigil. That was improper ordering. You want to Seek Power first so that your opponent doesn't know that you have the extra power, but as far as giving your opponent information goes, it doesn't matter too much. Alright, so Spire Chaplain here is a good card draw card, and we're already looking at a very good curve. Spire Chaplain gets to draw us cards, Kosul Brigade gets to discard them to turn them into bears, and Torgov Icecap Trader is filling in the slots in between, which means that we get pretty good benefits. My opponent's playing Feln. Feln has an okay round against this deck if it can get the Withering Witch combo, but for the most part the single target is not going to be very helpful against the deck that we're running. So we attack first. We get a Justice Sigil, which is good. And from here, I want to play Torgov Icecap Trader, because Torgov can discard the Privilege of Rank and do some pretty cool stuff for me. Alright, so we see a Wisdom of Elders from Ace Baggins. He may end up casting a Feeding Time or an Annihilate at this point. He's pretty likely to pull a removal off of his Wisdom at this point, so I think that the chances are pretty likely that something cool is going to happen here. All right. So he gets a depleted power, which means no Feeding Time, and possibly no Death Strike either. That means that I might actually get to hold on to Torgov for a turn, which is very, very good for me. I really only need 1 discard with Torgov to make the whole thing worth it, so pretty psyched about that. Yeah. Get good attacks in. We discard Privilege of Rank. Privilege of Rank plays itself when it gets discarded, which means we draw even more Justice Sigils. And I'll play a Spire Chaplain as well. Okay. So, deck's definitely going according to curve. We'll see if my opponent plays something down. I'm guessing we're going to see a Champion of Cunning or something like that now, which is a much scarier card. Primal Sigil's there. Alright, the Withering Witch is there. We're glad to see that early. It's going to trade with some of our stuff, but he didn't get to combo out with it, and we're pushing him pretty hard. So this is, you know, a basic deck test. If your deck can't, outpace a deck that isn't doing anything, then you really have to, sort of take care of that and make sure that you're doing something to shore up your early game. But here we go. Kosul Brigade, discarding our many, many Justice Sigils. And you don't need magic when you have bears. There we go. So now we have 13, 16, 19, and that should be enough. Ace Baggins probably has some single target removal in his hand, but at this point, there's too much stuff on the board. We've simply completely overloaded the board, and without a harsh rule, which is not available in green, I think he's going to be in a lot of trouble here. So very straightforward. I think I want to play one more game here with this deck, and then we'll show off the other ones. And we're up against Sans, the Skellington. This looks excellent. This is this is kind of what I would call the perfect hand. Kosul Brigade is not always necessary in the opener, but it's pretty nice to have. And Whispering Wind into Spire Chaplain means we're pretty likely to get some sort of card advantage. There are situations where your opponent kills the Whispering Wind and you feel a little sad about life, but most of the time your opponent killing the Whispering Wind means that your mid-range stuff matters more later. So even though you don't get as much cool card advantage, this is still pretty strong. My opponent's playing Elysian. We have a good matchup against mid-range Elysian stuff. The main weaknesses that I have found to this deck, it does okay against aggro, not amazing, but okay enough. It's just slow, it's just fast enough to be slightly faster than aggro, which is nice, and the Kosul Brigade often turns the tide, especially with those Spirit Guides. But very fast aggro can definitely knock it down, Bandit Queen, that kind of thing. Other matchups that don't go so well, Chalice, I would say, is not particularly amazing. The Peacekeeper's prods have helped with that quite a bit. I can discard the Vanquish here, but I know that's going to be useful. I think I actually just skip. We're pretty comfy with our current hand. We'll play Spire Chaplain here. Peacekeeper's prod might have been an okay discard, but I think it's probably fine to just keep it here. A Time Sigil, an Initiative Sands. I'm glad we didn't get a False Prince there. That would have been a bit more unfortunate. And Seed of Order is a perfectly good card here. Go ahead and attack in. I can discard this Seed of Order to get a better card, which I think I might do here. Not a Whispering Wind. That's probably a card we're going to discard, but that's okay. This looks a lot better now. And we're okay with my opponent drawing cards. We can generally deal with him playing a single mid-range threat a turn, because our mid-range is just a little bit faster, and we do have Permafrosts and Vanquishes in that mix. So if we can get going really, really quickly, that tends to help us out quite a bit. So the expected Sandstorm Titan does get played. That was not a surprise. From there, we will go ahead and Vanquish. Attack with everything, and this time I'm going to discard Whispering Wind, because I need to accumulate 6 power for Kosul Brigade. So I'm not going to discard the power that I just drew. This worked out pretty well. Spirit Guide is probably worth playing this turn, just to pressure my opponent out. I like this double block from him, that makes a lot of sense. But at this point I don't really need to be using Whispering Wind anymore. I got pretty much everything I need. Okay. The thing that I do very often is forget that Torgov wants you to choose a card to discard and then discard something I'm not supposed to. I didn't do that this time, thankfully. I'm going to discard the Peacekeeper's Prod. I'm actually going to discard the Spirit Guide. There are a lot of good options here. Shelterwing Rider is pretty decent. Spirit Guide is pretty decent. I think Spirit Guide is the card that I can play here to actually generate tempo, but Peacekeeper's Prod is the card I can play to just win the game. So I probably go for Shelterwing Rider. That way I can play Spirit Guide and just double Peacekeeper's Prod into victory. I don't need to play Kosul Brigade every time, so. So we're pushing the Shelterwing Rider. If I don't get my 6th power, that's fine. I don't even really want to play Kosul Brigade this turn. I want to play the Peacekeeper's Prods. Okay. That's a little unfortunate, but not too unfortunate. We'll go ahead and play our Peacekeeper's Prod here. Stun that. Play our 6th power, which is really good. And then Spire Chaplain will draw us another one. So now we've got more cards to discard to Kosul Brigade. Generally, once you hit 6 power, you don't need to play any more. You can play a 7th to have Protect up, but for the most part, you want to save those power for Kosul Brigades, because if you draw them with a bunch of power in your hand, then that power suddenly becomes very, very valuable. This deck does not flood out, and that's actually a really important aspect of the deck, is that, like, any Kosul Brigade deck does not flood, because it always has a use for excess power. So, something important to consider, Kosul Brigade actually sometimes discards cards that you would consider worthless, and managing the RNG in that fashion is really, really beneficial to you in particular. Okay, so from here I can stun something again if I want to, or I can just attack all in and I can play Kosul Brigade. And I think the attack all in plan looks pretty solid. So we'll go ahead and swing. get probably a pretty reasonable set of blocks. I was actually expecting more blocks for the Spirit Guide, but that's okay. We will go ahead and play a power, so I can seek power and still play Kosul Brigade.
No need magic when you have bear.
And with a Peacekeeper's prod in our hand, it seems very unlikely that my opponent can do anything to stop me this turn. We have just simply outpaced the Elysian midrange deck because our own midrange just generates more threats faster. It doesn't matter how many cards he has in his hand, we simply are pressuring too fast for a midrange deck to respond. And that's sort of the strength of the midrange here. I think this is a really good demonstrative deck, so we can move on to the next one after we win this one. Or something bad could happen and I could be completely shocked. No, I think we're good. Okay, so Peacekeeper's prod here, I put it probably on Kosul Brigade, just to make Kosul Brigade a little bit tougher. We stun that. And then we attack for a bunch. This is not lethal, but it's pretty close. 35 to 5, my opponent can play Surso next turn, get the Dawnwalker back. That's not bad, but it's not going to help him. Because he's now dealing with quite a few separate attackers.
I bring word.
And False Prince will not be able to block next turn. So we got one more round for Sans. We'll see what he picks up. A Crystallize would be okay for him here. He could actually stabilize the board. His False Prince would unfreeze, so that would be nice. But nope, not quite enough. So we get the job done. And that is the basic idea behind the Hooru midrange bear deck. It's really, really fun. I highly recommend it. Some other variations you can play with this one include, since you're running unstable forms, Magus of the Mists, Pearlescent Drakes work really well. Lots of cool stuff. Okay, so that was fun. Let's move on to something a little sillier. Okay, here's deck 2. This is Bearer of the Dawn, and we're following some similar concepts, but we're getting a little bit crazier with it, which I do love me some janks, so let's go ahead and fiddle around with what the idea is here. So we're being more aggressive this time, or at least more aggressively mid-range. We're running Pearlescent Drakes and Thunderstrike Dragons. We have a single Ilias the Broken Wing as something to discard a Thunderstrike Dragon to, because sometimes you have a bunch of green influence and you want to play a unit, and Thunderstrike Dragon is an Echo card, so why not discard it? We're not running the unstable forms this time. Instead, we're running Herald Song, so that we have more discard outlets. And the primary reason for that is that we are running Dawnwalker, a 4/1 with, when you play a unit with 5 or more, play Dawnwalker from your void exhausted. You'll notice this card costs 2-time influence. We don't really care. We have 12 different discard outlets in the deck. Actually, that is incorrect. We have 16 because Kosul Brigade also functions as a discard outlet for Dawnwalker. And indeed, I believe that if Kosul Brigade discards Dawnwalker as a cost, the 8/8 bear will summon the Dawnwalker back, which is a really fun thing to do. Beyond that, Dawnwalker is discarded by Whispering Wind, by Herald Song, and we just are really, really happy to go ahead and throw that card into the void. Once the card is in the void, we can get it back with Pearlescent Drake, Kosul Brigade, Nostrix Lord of Visions, which can also buff Dawnwalkers and other cards in the deck, including Thunderstrike Dragon, and Ilias the Broken Wing, all of which are 5 power or more units that get those Dawnwalkers back, get you a lot more value. So this deck's a little bit on the slower side, but the value engine of it is a lot more fun, and it does some stupid things with Dawnwalkers. You can also modify this into some time. You can play Sandstorm Titans, which I probably wouldn't recommend, or you can play cards like Hunting Teriax, which is really nice. And that way you can actually fit in cards that give the Dawnwalkers Killer, which are really, really fun things. So there's a lot of interesting ways to experiment with this idea. I encourage people to play all sorts of fun Dawnwalker decks. Yeah, this one I don't think is quite as good at climbing the ladder as the other one, but it does okay. So we're going to play a couple rounds with this, maybe just one, and we will go ahead and demonstrate that, and then we'll move on again, because bear decks everywhere. All right, here we go. All right, we're up against Zeus Long, and we have a good opening hand, Whispering Wind and Privilege of Rank. Even if Whispering Wind dies here, Privilege of Rank is a good way to sort of get to your other mid-range stuff, so this is a lovely hand to keep. I would like to find a Dawnwalker, so we might do some interesting discarding here. We're going to see a Rakano deck, which The other deck that we were playing is a little bit better against Rakano than this one. We don't like aggro quite as much here. But if we can get it going well enough, like if we can actually get to our 4 drops and our other stuff, then stuff can get pretty good. I do have a pretty solid hand for this, and not seeing a 2-drop means that we actually might have a pretty decent chance at this. One thing I can do here is actually just block the Oni Ronin. That's not a bad trade for me, but I think I'm going to pass this time. Just a Sigil there. And we see a Crown Watch Paladin, which is not a card that I really want to see here, but discard Privilege of Rank. Get ourselves a Torgov. And 2 Justice Sigils. From there I Permafrost. And a Primal buys me more Primal. Always seek for Primal, since the Privilege of Ranks get the green, so that generally just feels a little bit better. I have 7 power now, so I can discard power to draw other threats, which is fairly useful for you from a Whispering Wind perspective. Alright, swing for 1 here, discard a Justice Sigil. Found a 3rd Kosul Brigade, which is a few Kosul Brigades too many. Shelterwing Rider looks pretty good here, since if it gets vanquished, it still gets to block the Crown Watch Paladin. So, I feel very comfy with that. Now my opponent can do things like equip Hammer of Might, but then I have a 5/4, so I feel much more comfy there. Torgov would have been an okay decision here, but he could have gotten vanquished, or there could be Hammer of Might, or there could be a bunch of things. This deck might be running Plate, and that worries me pretty greatly. I don't think I care as much about the Magma Hound. We probably just block that. Okay. 7 power again, so pretty easy decision. We discard to draw something new. Found ourselves an Ilias the Broken Wing. Which I guess I should be discarding the Primal Sigils then. Whoopsie daisies. But we'll probably discard Ilias here because Kosul Brigade's more interesting. There is a Vanquish. That's no surprise. But now here's where the Rakano deck starts to run into trouble. It's got some stuff out against me, but I'm just going to go ahead and play a Kosul Brigade, discard Ilias and the Whispering Wind, and make a bear. And now I'm in a pretty solid position against a more aggressive deck, because I just have a lot of stuff on board, and if he tries to deal with something here, he's not going to be able to play units, so he's now behind on board in Rakano, which is not a thing that you want to be doing. So the slightly slower deck often wins in these situations. I didn't end up getting the Dawnwalkers here, so we may not... I'm not sure if we'll play this round. This is actually like very, very close to the previous deck. Okay. Got a Vanquish. Got a Furnace Mage. Really interesting Furnace Mage trigger there. I'll attack for 8. And then I will Kosul Brigade again. Get our 8/8 bear here to block the 7/6. And now we're pushing so much damage that it's actually going to get a little scary for him. He's got a lot of damage to respond with, but his attacks don't look good. And if he leaves the bears alone, they're going to kill him. So, a Rakano Outlaw. We Permafrost the 7/6. And we swing with everything. I think Zeus is now in too much trouble to win. He can he can chump 1 bear to live. And if he does that, then he has 1 more attack to try and get 15 damage in. But he'll have to do it down 1 unit, so it's pretty unlikely that he has any sort of saving grace here. A Deep Forge Plate would get him pretty close, but only if he has enough blockers to stop both bears, which is probably not going to be the case. So I don't think he has an out here, based on what he's blocked with. Cool. And now we're up against Scoot. This hand is really, really good. Doesn't have Dawnwalkers in it, but I like the aggressiveness here, so we're going to play it anyways and see what we can do. My opponent is playing something with Primal in it. Okay, so I'm guessing Elysian midrange. I've seen a lot of that lately. Could be Chalice. If it's Chalice, that's a little bit rougher. Desert Marshal is never a fun answer. We have Feln, and not only that, we have Dawnwalker, so everything's great right now. This looks really good, as long as the Whispering Wind doesn't die. I may have cursed myself. We see a Suffocate here, Annihilate, Permafrost, Permafrost. That's okay, we can just play Privilege of Rank here to start drawing cards. I'm unfortunately down a blue, so Torgov Icecap Trader is going to have a little bit of a hard time coming out and discarding that Dawnwalker for me. If I draw a blue, I feel better. If I draw a Herald Song, I feel pretty good. Drew the blue. Play our premium Torgov. Fancy, fancy. We get a Wisdom in response. That feels okay as well. And like, if nothing else, I can just discard Dawnwalker to Kosul Brigade, which actually feels pretty good. So we feel pretty comfy with the whole setup here. That's Death Strike 1. Torgov Icecap Trader here. And I've got more power than I need, which means that the Coastal Brigades are going to get their value.
Here is what was.
That's really sad. Okay. Well, I guess we'll play Coastal Brigade and we'll discard 2 Justice Sigils. I'm not going to throw the Dawnwalker under the bus when I can throw him directly into a Steward of the Past. Felon control matchup's a little bit trickier here, just on account of those nasty, nasty things. Okay, so we take that hit. And now we get to Dawnwalker Vanquish. Into a bear, into a Dawnwalker. Hooray! And we're doing pretty aggressively good. The champion is not currently super active, so it's probably going to be forced to a chump block situation. Oh, and that attack was not good, I think. I think that that's really, really quite bad for him. Let's go ahead and go with Nostrix Lord of Visions can buff the Dawnwalker if I choose to, which seems like a pretty good idea. Give all of my Dawnwalkers bonuses. I could also go for the Torgov, because the Torgov is a more likely play if I can play it. I'm kind of down on the Dawnwalker, though. That looks like fun. Swing with everything. He can get a pretty bad block if he wants to. Oh, I apparently just like... Nope, yep, there we go. We could have not played Nostrix there, or played Nostrix and not exhausted, and that would have been a more easy lethal, but... As it happens, that was the sort of safer long-term play. So, feeling pretty comfy with it. Probably wasn't the right decision overall, but you know, that was fun. So, okay. Now we get stupid. Here we go. And we're into it now. So this is the last one, left bear arm, and this one is probably not done yet, but I really enjoyed playing with it and definitely sort of wanted to show it off because I may not ever find the perfect balance on this one. It's okay. It's feeling pretty good now. So the basic idea behind this one, we use a few less Coastal Brigades here, but we still like them as a discard outlet. And instead of trying to discard Dawnwalkers, we're trying to discard power cards. Voice of the Speaker was a card that I used here, but I'm using Amber Acolyte instead because it tends to be a little bit more reliable for getting power cards for me. Spire Chaplain is back in here. Privilege of Rank is back in here. We're playing more defensively now. We're running Island's Choice and Harsh Rule. So we're playing more like a big Combre deck, which we in fact are, since we are also running Martial Ironthorn, Westwind Herald, and Aid of the Hooru with all of our discard outlets, so that we can discard Aid of the Hooru and cast it, or we can ramp to Aid of the Hooru and cast it that way. How do we ramp to Aid of the Hooru, you ask? Well, I'm so glad that you asked. No, primarily the way that we are doing this is through Forgotten Find, which plays 2 power cards from your void depleted. Now, we're already all about discarding power cards, as you've seen from our previous decks. So if we can get power cards into our void, we can play them very, very quickly. We can ramp extremely fast. The turn 6 here is Martial Ironthorn, play a power, play a Forgotten Find, and if you do that, you will have 13 power. 6, 5 plus 6, Yeah, it's actually 12. You'll have 12 power, which is 8 of the Hooru. So that is exactly enough to cast 8 of the Hooru and have a really, really delightful time. And yeah, as long as you can do your addition correctly, I think it works out pretty well. This is definitely a bit harder deck to pull off. It's more of a fun deck, but I really like it. So if you want to try it out, it's a delight. We like to do a lot of silly things with Ironthorn at 8 of the Hooru, and this is no exception. I'll probably have another brew up with Mask of the Torment pretty soon. So yes. Anyways, so that's the basic idea. We also run Great Parliament to capitalize on all of that sweet power boosting stuff. So this is sort of an owly ramp deck, except it's using Kosul Brigade to sort of stabilize the mid game, and Westwind Herald to be silly and do fun things. So yep, that's the basic idea. Let's play one round with that, and then we'll call it good. Ride for Glory. We are up against Nagasaki 232. We're going to go ahead and redraw here because I would like to, have some power. Opener looks good. We've got Whispering Wind. We've got Spire Chaplain. Those are the cards that we're always looking for. So looks lovely. This that particular part of the deck never changes. Whispering Wind and Spire Chaplain are just the best cards in it in the opening hand in any case. So Seat of Wisdom, Seat of Order. I get to seek power. I'm not going to be able to play Whispering Wind on 2 unless I get an undepleted power, or rather a basic sigil, but that should do me fine. I think I'm okay with playing a little bit delayed. We are against Rakano, but we found an undepleted, so okay. I've got 2 green, which is all I need. I've got 2 blue, which is all I need. I've got 1 yellow, which is all I need. So I don't need anything. We'll probably pick up a yellow just in case I'm... No, I'm not insane. That should be everything. I will grab a green just in case there's something I'm forgetting, like a Peacekeeper's prod that I left in by accident, but I think we're actually looking pretty solid. Sorry, the list on the left is not correct. We'll go ahead and remove that. I'm sure that's probably like a little out of date. So we just... Yep. Hide that sucker real quick. There we go. Anyways, so we've got Seat of Order and Whispering Wind. And I actually have to make the transition. There we go. Ugh. All right, it's too late now. We're not changing anything. Okay, so that attack seems fine. If there is a torch, then everything's good. But life's looking pretty solid. No torch, no torch, no torch. He wants to play a 2-drop, but he might actually have a torch. Okay. What to do here is an interesting question. Westwind Herald gets me 6 drops, which I don't really need. Playing for a Justice gets me Privilege Rank, which is kind of cool. But then I don't get to cast a lot of the cards that I actually want to cast. So that's a little bit on the weak side. I think it is correct to attack with Whispering Wind. Let's try and get an Ironthorn. Not another Harsh Roll. Okay. So we get to Spire Chaplain here. Spire Chaplain gets to block the Oni Ronin. And from there, we get to have shenanigans happen. I actually probably block Rakano Outlaw even. Well, it's a rough call. I don't even know if I want to make a block here just because, like, the attack doesn't look amazing. Okay, Seat of Wisdom. So we now have 5 power, which means we're pretty comfy with the attack here. I'm actually going to attack, get the power. Yeah, I'll attack with both. And we'll discard a power to draw a new card, which happens to be a Seek power, but that's okay. It doesn't have to work out perfectly. And next turn we'll do the same thing again, only we'll Harsh Roll. Take my 4, that's perfectly fine. It's a rough hit, but it's not a bad one. So 19. Amber Acolyte's pretty cool for me. Go ahead and discard more power, because yes, definitely. And now I feel very comfy in Harsh Rolling. Are we going to see a protect? Nope, this just ends now. Okay, so Westwind Herald can repeat Harsh Rules, which is very useful to me. Can also repeat Great Parliament, which is pretty useful as well. Oh, interesting. Let's play Westwind Herald to sort of psych him out. Like, I want to actually get to a point where I want to make him afraid to attack me with that 4/4. Alright, he's not afraid to attack me with that 4/4. But that's okay. No blocks. We do, nonetheless, get to attack here. I will repeat Harsh Rule, and then I'll Harsh Rule.
This ends now. This ends now.
And a Time Sigil here looks pretty solid. Next turn is a little trickier. Martial Ironthorn or Westwind Herald is a tricky
Rule
one.
number 1, don't drop your tools.
Okay, we will go ahead and say Westwind Herald here.
Wind is warm with renewal.
I'm going to Herald Song and actually discard Herald Song. Try and draw into something better. Got a Seed of Progress. I'm feeling pretty good about that. That allows me to Amber Acolyte and Ironthorn in the same turn. And if my opponent attacks me with that 2/2, then he gets Harsh Rolled again, which I'm guessing he doesn't really want to do. Oh no, that's a problem. So now I need a Vanquish. And if I don't find a Vanquish, we're probably out of luck. Island's Choice will do it. Okay, we'll play an Ironthorn here.
You've run far enough.
End my turn. I've got Island's Choice. He's got a pause here, which makes me worry about, like, Finest Hour. But there's nothing I can do if he's got Finest Hour. Whoa! Getting pretty big for your britches there. Alright, we'll just go ahead and Island's Choice that. Please no protect. I see this pause.
You don't
Okay.
wanna make my allies
Alright.
your enemies.
Our defense has worked. That part's fine. We have a Kosul Brigade. That's not going to be a helpful card in this situation, but certainly could be later.
You've run far enough.
And if I want to, I can fill the board with owls, which seems like a pretty good idea at this point. That'll stop Soulfire Drake from wrecking our faces. And it'll also get us into a position where we're looking pretty good on board. Kosul Brigade is probably a single play now.
Rule number 1, don't drop your tools.
Okay, we have a Tinker Overseer, which is scary. The Vanquish comes down on Ironthorn, which is not that scary. Privilege of Rank into Kosul Brigade seems like a pretty good plan here. Although I could also play the Privilege to get the 8 of the Hooru if I draw it, but I think Kosul Brigade just overloads this board, so that's actually a better idea. We should try and push for the win. And if we get Forgotten Finds, we have a ton of power in our voids, so that looks pretty fun. This is pretty gigglesome. What have we got? Valkyrie Enforcer silences a flyer. So now I'm a bit behind. Not that behind, but a bit behind. We block the 5/5. He's got a Finest Hour. Oh, I actually should have just chump blocked it. We knew about the Finest Hour. We saw the fast spell response. You win some, you lose some. I could have won that if I had played the bear and waited for the aid. But that's okay. I believe we are now out of this game. That was nonetheless a great round. I did enjoy that a lot. So we'll probably call that one good for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm going to call it here because I'm guessing this video's run pretty long already. I had a really great time, and feel free to like or subscribe if you like this video. There's some stuff coming up. I'm probably going to be launching a Patreon pretty soon, And I'm also going to be launching a second site for like other like sort of videos when we just want to like screw around in some other game. I want this to be my primary Eternal channel, and I want to like always have constant content up on this one. So like when I feel like uploading an Overwatch video or something, I just want to have a place for it. So it'll be that'll be up soon. I think it's actually created now, so it's called Pojo Plays. And if you're interested in that, that's also a thing that can happen. Although there will not be any videos up on it at the time that I am saying this. But soon. Have a really good night, everyone. Thank you so much for watching. Cheers.